Okay, so I just plugged in 10 for x. Now we're just simplifying algebraically. I'm going step by step because they want you to write the steps down. So that gives me pi over 12 times 6, which gives me 6 pi over 12, which reduces to pi over 2. Okay, right here, you have to take cosine. What is cosine of pi over 2? Cosine's the x value, and at pi over 2, what is your x value? 0.
Is that like by using the left hand trick?
Yep, left-hand trick, pi over 2 straight up. That's the y-axis.
Like the 0, 1.
Yeah, so it'd be 0, 1. Yes. And cosine is the x value, so that's 0. Okay, so we're going to follow the same steps. This time we've just changed it to 8.
I don't understand that step.
Which one?
How you got from pi over 12 times 4 to pi over...
Okay, because it would be 4 pi over 12, and what's 4 twelfths?
4 is 1/3.
1/3. So you just put the pi back on it. Okay, so now this is where we go to our left-hand trick. So this is pi over 3, so that's going to be, this is pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3. Cosine is your x value, so it's your top finger. There's one finger up there, so what's cosine going to be? 1/2. 1/2.
Wait, okay, so I'm at the part where it's like 5 plus 4 cosine, and then like you multiply pi over 12 times 3, and that would give you pi over 4.
Alright, so what is cosine of pi over 4? Square root 2 over 2.
I'm still lost on that.
Okay, so left-hand trick.
Okay.
Pi over 4, which finger?
Wait, okay, it says 2, 3, 4, so that'd be this middle?
Okay, we're going, it is the middle finger.
Okay.
But that's going the backwards way. That would be if you had an arc. This is, they've given me the angles. So, this is 0, this is pi over 6, this is pi over 4. So you fold it in.
And then that's square root of 2 over 2.
Yeah. Which simplifies, because the 4 and the 2. So you end up with 5 plus the square root of 2, and that's all you can do as far as exact answers go. Because you can't add something inside the house with something outside. Okay, so the reason that they had us go through those operations is because they want us to write down the operations for, if they've given us an x, how we solve for y. So what we did first was plugged in x. That was our first step. And then, so what did we do second? Every single time, what did you do? Subtract, inside the parentheses, which was subtract 4. And then, so that was this step. So that's where I subtracted 4 right here. Multiplied by your b value. gave us here. And so what's happening from here, from this line to the next line, what are we doing? Taking cosine. And then on the next of all of those, we multiplied by 4. And then add 5. Okay, so now, we're gonna solve it down here, but right here they just want us to do it backwards in order to get x by itself. So if we were gonna get x by itself, we would be using the same order of operations, but working backwards. So we should, if you look at it, we should subtract 5 first. So we would subtract 5. Then this, if we're going in reverse, it said multiply by 4, so instead we would divide by 4. Alright, so now what about this step? It says take cosine.
Arc cosine.
We would arc cosine. And then it says multiplied by b. So we would divide by b. Now our b happened to be a fraction. So you could also multiply by the reciprocal, which is what we'll do in a minute. And then it says subtract 4, so we would add 4. And then that would be it. We wouldn't need to plug in x. We would now know what x is. So now, we're going to look at that's how it should work. This is, according to this, these are the order of operations for plugging in a number and evaluating and getting the answer. So this should be the steps for solving to get x. So we're now going to solve and get x. Okay, they did it over here. Now we're going to go through step by step and see what they did. The first thing they did was, in fact, subtracting 5, which is what we wrote, that they would subtract 5, and they did that. The next thing they did was divide by 4. So it's right there, they divided by 4. Then, right here, they arc cosine. So you can see that right here in this step. There's arc cosine. Alright, so now look at the next step, because now something has changed. Something is different. Look at what's here in this step. There's a 2 pi in that wasn't there before. That's the period. And it came in right after, or at the same time, that they arc cosine this. So we need to make note of that. I'm going to say function. I'm going to say when you arc function, because it doesn't just have to be cosine. It could be sine or tangent. When you arc, the period is added in. The other thing is, if you'll notice, there's a plus and minus sign in front of this 2 pi over 3. When they arc cosine, there is a plus and a minus, which means how many answers are there? 2, and there should be. Because with cosine, remember, there's a going down in the water answer and a coming back up. So there has to be 2 solutions. Remember we talked about yesterday, cosine's the easy one. You find one of them, and you can just make it negative. So that's where those 2 answers came from. And they added in the period. Okay? And then the next step after arc cosining should have been dividing by b. Well, they multiplied by the reciprocal. So our b value up here was pi over 12. Instead of dividing by pi over 12, they switch flipped it and they multiplied by 12 pi, which is the same thing. And then the next step would be to add 4, and then you can see right here they added 4 to both sides. They put it in the front. Okay, so now they already walked through it, but before we go to the next page, I'm going to walk you through this. So either find something. There's a little bit of room on the back of the bottom of this page. You won't need it on the very back page, unless you write humongous. Let's walk through this one together so that we can do it ourselves. I think it's more beneficial to us if we do it. So 3 equals 5 plus 4 cosine pi over 12. Okay, so we're solving this, just like we were doing yesterday, it's just a slightly more complicated problem. So we're trying to get x by itself, so what are we going to do first? Subtract 5. Okay, now we're trying to get x by itself. What would our next move be? Divide by 4. Okay. So now we've divided by 4. We're still trying to get x by itself. What should we do now? Arc cosine. So that gets rid of the word cosine over here, which will get rid of that big set of parentheses. So if I arc cosine the right, I have to arc cosine the left. Alright, now this is where we have to go to our hand. Cosine is the x value. So I need, how many fingers where? One finger on top, because cosine is the x value. So if I need one finger on top, I fold in this angle. What angle does that finger represent? Pi over 3. Okay, so that's not quite my answer though, because that would be, I'm just going to put it over here so I don't forget, not 13, sorry, pi over 3, that would be my answer if 1/2 was positive, but it's not. I need where cosine is negative. Quadrants 2 and 3. Okay, now remember what we talked about yesterday? That chart told us yesterday that even though I do need 2 answers, I can just take the first one with cosine and make it negative. So the only one I'm really going to concern myself is the one that's in quadrant 2. That's the first one. So what has a 3 on bottom in quadrant 2? 2 pi over 3. So I know I've got 2 pi over 3. That's what happens when I arc cosine negative 1/2. I get 2 pi over 3. Now because we know I need a going down and a coming up answer, and I know the rule for cosine is I can take not just 2 pi over 3, but the negative version also, I'm going to put a plus and minus in front. Now here is where this special note comes in. I just took the arc function, so I also have to add in the period. So right here, when I got 2 pi over 3, I'm going to add in 2 pi in. That's my period. So all of that just happened on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, the only thing that happens is the arc cosine cancels the cosine, which cancels the need for the big set of parentheses, and leaves me pi over 12 times x minus 4. Alright, so my next move is to, we would say, a lot of times we like to say divide by pi over 12, because we need to get rid of it, but it's a fraction, so we would have to keep switch flip. So we're just going to multiply by the reciprocal. That's the same thing. So if I multiply by 12 over pi, okay, on the right-hand side, it just cancels everything out. 12 and 12 cancel, because the one's on bottom, one's on top, and pi cancels. That's the whole point in it, leaving you just x minus 4. On the left-hand side, I'm going to write this out. Now, I know some of you are good enough that you don't have to, but I want you to see it. You have to distribute the 12 over pi to both pieces. So that would be 12 over pi times positive negative 2 pi over 3, and 12 over pi times 2 pi in, and I'm going to go ahead and put that over 1. my pi's cancel, and I get positive and negative 24 over 3, which is 8. Over here, your pi's cancel, and you get plus 24n. Okay, so right here, you still have, my x is still not by itself, and that's my whole goal here is to get x by itself, but I have two separate things going on here. I have plus 8 plus 24n, and I have minus 8 plus 24n. So right here, I'm going to break it into two problems. I have 8 plus 24n equals x minus 4, and I have negative 8 plus 24n. One represents my going down in the water answer, and one represents my coming out of the water answer. Now I can add 4 to both sides. And there's your two separate answers. And if you look, that's exactly what they got. On the bottom of the page, right here. Okay, so now at the top of the page, those are what we call our general answers, general solutions. Now we want some exact solutions. Okay, first thing is, what is the expression, where does the expression 24n come from? And what does 24 have to do with the original function? What is it? It's your period, right? And remember how we found period before. Period equals 2 pi divided by b. What's your b value this time?
Pi over 12.
Pi over 12. So 2 pi divided by pi over 12. Which you would keep, switch, flip. Your pi's would cancel, and you get 24. So it's just your period. It just, when we calculated it, when we plugged it in, the period was found for us when we plugged it into the equation. Okay, so we're going to put our two formulas right here. It says plus and minus, so the plus one was 12 plus 24n, and the minus one was negative 4 plus 24n. And now we're going to solve it if n were 1. So if n were 1 on the first one, you'd get 36, and on the second one, you'd get 20. So just in case you're lost on what I'm doing, I did 12 plus 24 times 1. And now I'm going to do 12 plus 24 times 2. This would be negative 4 plus 24 times 1. This is negative 4 plus 24 times 2. Is everybody all right? Okay. It says you can check them with your calculator. Okay, so this is just the chart, same chart that we talked about yesterday. So all of these we are going to find. Now, some of them, and you'll see in just a minute, when you arc sine, arc cosine, arc tangent, you'll find it in your calculator. If they're not values that show up on the unit circle. If they're values that show up on the unit circle, you arc and you use your left hand trick and you find a solution. We figured out yesterday, we talked about yesterday, you only have to find one, and then you can use this little chart to figure out what your others will be. So your arc sining will give you a solution, or your arc tangenting will give you a solution, because we're just going to take the first one that we find. We talked about cosine's the easy one, because if you want to find the other one, you just make the one you found negative, and you add 2 pi in. What about sine, though? My first thing is I can take the first one and add 2 pi in. But what about the second solution for sine? How do you find it? It's the trickier one.
The one with the egg pie minus.
Pi minus. So it's gonna be pi minus the solution that you found plus 2 pi n.
Teachers, pardon this announcement. At the end of this class period, we'll be having tutorials. Students will need to remain in their 5th period or 4th period class. Thank you.
Okay, tangent's an easy one because there is only one answer. It's the one you find. But it's periodic, so how do I find the whole next step? What's the period of tangent? Pi n. Alright, so now they've given you some more examples down here. And if you'll notice, these things are decimals. That's because when they got to this step, if you'll look at it, it's 7/8. 7/8 is not on the unit circle, which means they had to arc sign and use their calculator. So, real quick, if I plug in arc sign of 7/8 in my calculator, I get this nasty decimal, 1.065. That's where this value came from. Then to get the other value, they do pi minus the one that the calculator gave you. That's where the 2.076 comes from. So that's why right here we have 2 values. Then you weren't done yet because you still had to multiply by 4 over pi, which they just plugged in the calculator and multiplied. And they got these as their 2 general solutions. Same thing happened over here. You got tangent of 4/3. 4/3 is not a unit circle value, so that means you're using your calculator. They plugged in their calculator. They got one answer for tangent. That's all you need for tangent. So then they still had to multiply to get rid of the pi over 2. They had to add 1. So that's where this information came from. That's your general answer. So on the next page, they're just wanting us now to find specific solutions for those. So I'll leave them up. Write these 2 at the top of your next page, and write this one at the top of your next page. That way you can find the general. You know, on the 4th page. All they're wanting us to do is to plug in 1 and find the actual solutions that occur if we went around another time. Okay. In the preceding examples, at what point in the process of solving the equation is the general form with the n value first written down? When do we first put the n value in? When you arc. When you arc. Okay, so now we're going to try one. We're going to try and go all the way through. This time we're going to find the general solution, the one that has the n, And then we want to find the first 3 positive solutions. Okay, so I'm just solving, getting x by itself, so what should I do first? Subtract 18. Okay. Now, divide by 11. Alright, so now I'm trying to get x by itself, and I cannot get x out of those parentheses until I get rid of those parentheses, and they are there because of that cosine. So I'm going to arc cosine. Now, if I arc cosine the left, I have to arc cosine the right-hand side. On the left, it cancels the cosines and leaves me pi over 3x. On the right, I have arc cosine of -2/11. Is -2/11 on the unit circle? Which means we're going to use our calculator to find this value. So I'm going to arc cosine. And I get 1.754. Now this is cosine. So if 1.754 is an answer, so is -1.754, because that's how cosine works. So I'm going to put positive and negative in front of it. And I also just put arc cosine in my calculator, which means I have to add 2 pi in. Because I arc functioned. As soon as you arc function, you add in 2 pi in. Now x is still not alone. I have to multiply by, or divide by pi over 3, which is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply by 3 over pi. 3 over pi. On the left, that cancels out and leaves you just x. On the right, it needs to be distributed. So I got 1.754 in my calculator. I'm going to multiply it by 3 over pi. When you multiply 2 pi in by 3 over pi, the pi's cancel and you get just 6 in. Okay, now, that's our general solution. I need to find my first 3 positive answers. So I'm going to use my calculator to do it, but just be cautious because they're not necessarily going to come from the plus. So I have a 1.675 plus 6 in, and I have negative 1.675 plus 6 in. So 1.675 plus 6 times 1, that gives me 7.675. I'm going to do the negative. Negative 1.675 plus 6 times 1. So that gives me 4.325, which is actually my first positive answer. Now I'm just going to do 2. Okay, and all it asks for the first 3 positive, and now I've got 4 positive, so I'm done. Because I got, my first one would be 4.325, then 7.675, and then 10.425. That's my first 3 positive answers. So that's all you need. Okay, so try B. Okay, when I get to this point, and I have to arc sign, am I using my calculator or no? No. Cause cause 1/2 is on the unit circle. So, if I'm gonna left hand trick this, I need how many fingers where? One on bottom, because sine is your y value, so I need one finger on bottom, which means I need to fold in this, which is which one? Pi over 6. So, right here, so I have just arc signed. So I have pi over 10x equals pi over 6 plus 2 pi. Now, that's my first answer, but I need my second sign answer, and it is not as straightforward as cosine. I can't just make it negative, I wish I could. But instead, I have to do pi minus the answer that I got when I arc signed. So that would be 6 pi over 6, right? Pi is the same thing. Is everybody okay if I just change this pi to 6 pi over 6? Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to subtract pi over 6, and that gives me 5 pi over 6 plus 2 pi n. Alright, now you're still not done because you're still trying to get x by itself. So, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal instead of dividing. I'm just going to multiply by the reciprocal.